And good evening, ladies and gents. Good day, wherever you might be in the world. Now, this is a slightly unusual Splendid Isolation because we've got two main things we're going to talk about today, as well as some other topics. One is obviously the recent St. George's Day, England's National Day. And this morning in Australia, it's actually Anzac Day. Anzac obviously stands for the Australia-New Zealand Army Corps, and goes back to the beaches of Gallipoli in 1915 in World War One. And in honor of Anzac Day, I'm going to start us off with the last post. Okay. Okay, and that was the last post, as it is Anzac Day morning here down under. Interestingly enough, the Anzacs were by no means the first Australian soldiers to fight alongside the British Army. The very first ones were actually the New South Wales Volunteers, infantry and artillery, who went to the Sudan in 1884 to help with the Gordon Relief Expedition. And then, of course, lots of Australians and New Zealanders fought alongside British forces in the Second Anglo-Boer War between 1899 and 1902. Okay, good morning to right on Limbu, Warlock and Adaman. I'm going to go around and do what I always do and ask you gents if you've got something you particularly want to bring up as our first topic, and I'll start with Limbu.
So I'll start with St. George's topic. So let me start with this verse. Ecclesiastes 3:18. The grass is withered and the flower is fallen, but the word of our Lord endureth forever. So he St. George was a member of the guards of the Roman Empire, and he was sentenced to death for refusing to refute his Christian faith under the Romans. With Catholicism in the roots of the original Anglo world, when St. George killed the dragon with his lance, as George was killing the dragon, he told the city's citizens that this act was to show that the power of God was in him. So in 494 AD, Pope Gelasius canonized Saint George, and he said the following: "Whose names are just reverend among men, but whose acts are known only to God." So on the 23rd of this month, it was essentially when he was martyred. So we celebrate on this day.
Okay, we're certainly going to talk a little bit more about St. George in a minute or two. Adamant, anything you want to particularly bring up to start with today?
No, actually.
No?
No. It's been a fairly uneventful couple of weeks for me. The St. George stuff kind of gets a bit tiring. We see all the same comments, which is a shame.
Yeah, I'm certainly going to be talking about that in a minute.
It's kind of funny, isn't it, that like the Tories have basically wholesale copied every Labour policy, and the only one they won't copy is a bank holiday for every patron saint.
Yeah. Yeah, well, they can't afford to give people that one extra day off. I mean, especially when like most people haven't been out of work for most of the year. You know,
Yeah.
Can't have England having a national day for a holiday. I mean, that would be appalling. Yeah. Okay, Royal Oak. Anything you want to particularly talk about this morning?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I had like a, I don't know, brief reconsideration of like English identity when it comes to St. George's Day. Obviously, St. George's Day, I think, is also the, I think it's Georgia, it's the national holiday of as well. I think there's somewhere else, I think as well. Ethiopia, yeah. That's the one. And I suppose like, I don't know, it sort of like makes you think, I think like we think a lot about Britain. I think like everyone on here is from England, right? So, well, I mean, we think a lot about, English people. I think it's only English and people from Ulster that consider themselves British over, their national identity. So like either English or Ulsterman in that case. And I think I don't know. I suppose something sort of gets forgotten there. And I think there was something I read. It was who was it? It was this guy called Professor Robert Toombs who wrote a book like talking about the history of England. And he said that England is a rambling old property with ancient foundations, a large Victorian extension, and a 60s garage, and some annoying leaks and drafts. And I suppose, like, I don't know. I when I read that, I sort of like thought about, I don't know. I suppose like an old house needs maintaining, doesn't it? But I suppose like there was this other poll. There was this poll that came out last year, that said that in Scotland, 80% of young people like had a general like approval of like Scotland in general. Like, they see Scotland positively. And I think the same in Wales, it was the case that like young people saw Wales more positively than older people. And I think that's because like Welsh and Scottish identities are tied to this whole like sort of anti-establishment thing. I suppose, I mean, like young people like are like, I don't know, more anti-establishment when they're younger, I suppose. So I know if like, people in England see like Englishness as a sort of establishment thing, that could be like why they're opposed to it. But I suppose like, I don't know, like going back to the house, I think the poll said that 45% of young English people, no, sorry, only 45% of young English people see Britain positively. So that's like 55% are either neutral or see it negatively. So I suppose
I think it depends on where they do their poll in England also. Like if you do a poll like that in London, for example, you're going to be speaking to a lot of people who are not actually English or British, in my opinion.
That's true. Yeah, I think I don't know. I think it's generally true though. I think like an Englishness is sort of attached to the whole establishment thing, isn't it? And I suppose young people are sort of, I don't know, more opposed to that wrongly. But I mean, like 72% of older people saw it positively. as opposed to like only 45% of young people. But I suppose like I don't know. I think to quote I think one of our more controversial prime ministers, I think Winston Churchill. I can't remember the exact quote, but he was like, there's that forbidden word, England. Like it's something that's often forgotten, I suppose, like in the whole British thing. Like I think Roger Scruton made the argument his whole life that like Englishness was being subsumed by the British thing. I think there's a point in that. I'm pro union, but like there's a point in like a sort of English identity sort of being subsumed by the Britishness. But I've spoken for a bit long already, so I'll let someone else speak.
Well, I would certainly say in my own case, I'm an Englishman first, and I'm British second. I'm equally proud to be British, but I'm first and foremost I'm an Englishman. If someone asks me what am I, that's my answer. I'm an Englishman. So that's my answer to that. Adam, what do you think?
I might be misremembering this. I'm sure I've re-listened to some Bowden recently, and I'm sure there is a section in a Bowden speech where it might be in his vanguardism speech, where he mentions about other examples of other countries where the sort of reigning identity takes on the identity of the larger entity. So like Prussians with Germany and stuff like that. And like the Northern French with France and things like that. I do sometimes wonder if there's a generational thing here in the UK though, because like I want to say England first and Britain second, and I struggle to do that. I often when people ask, I go, "Oh, I'm British," and that's kind of where it goes. As with older people,
I've just got into this. I've just got into this habit because I've lived overseas a lot of my life, like in South Africa and Australia. I've just got into this habit. If someone asks me what I am, particularly because people don't understand my rather strange accent, I'll always say I'm an Englishman. That's my actual absolute answer. Now on that, also by the way, on the Bowden stuff, hopefully we're going to have Sojo on in 15 or 20 minutes or so. He said he's going to be a bit late this week. On the St. George's stuff, I'm going to play us another little bit of music, which hopefully this time I will be able to do without messing it up.
And did those feet in ancient times walk upon England's mountains free? And was the holy Lamb of God on England's pleasant pastures see? And did the clouds and lights divine shine forth
We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
Okay, so hopefully that will have completely pissed off all the Nazi laughers in our audience. St. George's Day. I'm going to start this one up. Obviously, St. George's Day was a couple of days ago. And every single year, the left-wing types come out with exactly the same bullshit. And they basically turn around and say something along the lines of St. George had nothing whatever to do with England, and he was a Turk, he was some sort of immigrant or all this sort of nonsense. In fact, of course, as Rylon Limbu said earlier, St. George was a Roman soldier. He most certainly was not a Turk. The Turks were still in Central Asia at the time that St. George was alive. They didn't take Constantinople until some stage in the 1200s. So absolute nonsense that he was a Turk. He was a Roman soldier. He was known in England, even in Alfred the Great's time. So, going right back to the 800s. English crusaders under Richard the Lionheart in the Third Crusade in the 1100s actually were using St. George as a battle cry. That's of course when Richard the Lionheart defeated the famous Saladin, several times in fact. And the cult of St. George became particularly a big deal in England during the 100 Years' War with France. So there is ample reason to associate St. George with England, and he most certainly was no sort of Turk. He was probably a Greek actually, but he was in fact a Roman soldier. So I shall throw that open to everybody.
Yeah, could I just add that in his Wikipedia as well? It says that he is Greek, he's from Greek descendants and sort of a Balkan type of descendant. So the idea that he was some sort of Turkish descendants is just nonsense, and it's obviously left-wing nonsense.
Yeah, it's done on purpose, Oh, he's got nothing to do with England. Well, he's been associated with England for over 1,000 years, so I'd say that's quite a long time myself. Adam, Warlock, you got anything to add on that one?
Well, I think we had a different patron saint at one time. I think was it Saint Cuthbert? I can't remember, but
that would have been a very long time ago, I think, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think I don't know. Ataman was saying before about like how I suppose like Englishness and Britishness were sort of. I'm changing the subject a bit. Sorry, but I mean they were sort of subsumed into the whole Britain thing. I think it's kind of relevant, but I don't know. I suppose if you want to go back that far, you could say like I think Mercia had their own patron saints, as did Wessex, as did I think it was the Seven Kingdoms. There was Essex, those kind of places. They all had patron saints. So, I mean,
yeah.
I think I don't know. Is there? I don't think Britain has a patron saint. Like, there's no patron saint of Britain. I don't think, is there? So
no, not as far as I know.
Yeah,
but well, I mean, given we've got 4, we don't really need any more.
I suppose not. No. Yeah. Mm.
Adam, you got anything to say about that one?
I've only just got back, so I just caught the tail end of it.
We're just talking about the left-wing stuff.
All right. Well, Sojo said about St. George in Catalonia. Isn't the St. George's cross on the Catalonian flag?
I think it may be actually. Let me just.
I don't think there's probably a version of it with it on, but I think the normal Castilian flag is just yellow and red stripes. I think the yellow and red. I'm colorblind, so I can't tell, but
Right.
I think that's what they are.
Yeah, it is. It is yellow and red stripes for sure. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I might be getting it mixed up with somewhere else. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of they do this sort of self-owned thing, don't they? Where they tell you that you're evil and racist for idolizing this sort of white Christian man, and then they turn around and go, "Oh, by the way, he's actually Turkish." It's like, okay, so what's your problem? Why don't you like him then?
Yeah, it's just absolute craziness, basically.
Mm.
But it bores me how every year these left-wing types do exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And like far too infrequently does anyone refute them, and turn around and say no. Like, even in Alfred the Great's time, St. George was known in England. And like on the Third Crusade, you've got English crusaders fighting under Richard Lionheart, using St. George as a battle cry. And of course, he's very firmly associated with the English troops in the 100 Years' War. So, I mean, that's going back a long time into history.
Yeah, it wasn't actually yet the English flag, though, was it? During the Third Crusade, it was afterwards.
Well, yeah, but also, of course, the Holy Cross is kind of what became the English flag.
Yeah. But this was I think this was a couple of years ago now. I assume everyone here knows Kahindi Andrews, that arsehole, yes, Black Studies guy.
He's a total arsehole. Yes, I know him.
He did a special on, I think it was Good Morning Britain, where he was trying to argue with his back. It was like a blind debate that the English flag was racist and we should basically do away with it. And he got fucking done in by some sort of like 17-year-old football fan. But in the end, he just had to pull out his last little ace where he's like, yeah, but the Crusades, I bet those Muslims felt oppressed by the English flag. And I was thinking, oh Jesus, you fucking cuck.
Yeah, and of course the Crusades were actually a counterattack against Islam. Like, Islam had been aggressively attacking Christian territory for several hundred years by the time of the First Crusade. So they were, if anything, actually a counterattack against Islam rather than outright aggression.
Yeah, I mean, actually, sorry, you go on.
I mean, I think I was just going to say, like, even from like a neutral perspective, I think the First Crusade was pretty justifiable. Ones after that, you have to use a little bit more of a Christian mindset. But anyway, carry on, Ataman.
Well, the Third Crusade under Richard the Lionheart, which was actually quite a successful one, although he didn't manage to recapture Jerusalem, basically because he wasn't willing to risk the destruction of his army. That crusade was really called for because of the people who had settled in the Middle East, the Christians. And bear in mind, there were Christians there before the Crusades who were basically being oppressed by the Muslims, but of course no one mentions that anymore. Yeah. That crusade actually was pretty justifiable because that one was another call for help.
Yeah, well, I'm not an expert on all of that period of history, so very, very well, they may well be justifiable. I think that, to be honest, I don't know, a friend-enemy distinction, isn't it? Anyway, Ataman was saying something probably much more intelligent than I was saying, so I'll let him carry on.
Yeah, sorry, Ataman, carry on.
No, I was just, I was going to say, I'm literally just finishing up the last couple of days, the Hilaire Bellarque's book on the Crusades. Is that how you say his name? Whatever. And yeah, it's kind of refreshing to read sort of a take from someone like him, where he's literally just like, yeah, they're heretics. just take it all back. And I mean, he basically makes the argument that the Crusades actually weren't brutal enough. He essentially says that they should have taken more territory and really secured a much better foothold than just trying to take Jerusalem and call it a day.
Yeah, I've heard that they really needed Damascus, for example. But I will say there is an excellent channel on YouTube called Real Crusades History, which I recommend to people who have got any interest in this subject. Like they regularly do videos and streams that cover all of the Crusades. And they're very good, and they're actually working on a TV series at the moment, which is going to be about the First Crusade, which might be quite interesting, particularly as it's being made by the Christian channel, which means it probably won't be woke left-wing nonsense. So there we go. Didn't think I'd ever say that a few years ago, I've got to say.
Is that being is that the one being made, or they're helping to make it by that? Is it Edward West, who's
I
written
think
books
so.
on the Crusades?
Yes, I believe it is. Yes, yeah. I think they're the guys who are one of the guys. He's one of the guys who actually runs that runs the Real Crusades History channel on YouTube. So
yeah, I read a few of his essays that he had on the internet a while ago, and they're pretty good.
Yeah, I've followed his channel for quite a long time. I find his streams and stuff pretty informative, and certainly it addresses a lot of the common errors that people have about the Crusades. And I mean, don't forget the first one was actually a call for help from Constantinople. So, you know, the Emperor of Byzantium, which was the last remaining bit of the Roman Empire, actually called for help from the Western nations.
Yeah, but and there was also the thing where like they basically during the First Crusade, during the proper part of the First Crusade, basically said to the Emperor, if you send down an army to help us secure Jerusalem, you can have, your choice of all this land.
Yeah.
And he never sent anything.
Yeah, the Byzantine emperors were, shall we say, the later ones. I mean, some of the later ones were like under really harsh circumstances. Like Constantinople was running out of men and money and land area. But there were also some fairly dodgy late Byzantine emperors, although I'm by no means an expert on that era of history, I must say. But so would we all be in favour of a St. George's Day national holiday for England? Because I certainly would.
Yeah, in the British Empire colony of Jerusalem. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite interesting, like seeing the Labour Party do that. There was a thing. Paul Williams, who's the new candidate they've got in Hartlepool. They're having like optional, they have like those things you can put in your window saying vote in Labour and stuff like that. They had special St. George's Day ones, and I was just thinking, like, would they do that in Bristol? Would they do that in London? Like,
well, no one would put them up in those places.
Well, yeah, at risk of a brick through the window. I think my parents wanted to put up a Labour thing, but I think they were worried about a brick through the window as well. So, I mean,
I'm pretty sure. I don't know if it was Alaman or Sojo, but I'm echoing through somebody's. I'm echoing through somebody's microphone, guys. I think it must be Limbo, actually. I'm not sure if it was Ataman or Sojo, but someone said, I think a few weeks ago on the show, that the Labour Party were trying to go more patriotic and use the Cross of St. George and the Union Jack more. Am I misremembering? I don't think I am.
Yeah, no, they're definitely doing that. I mean, the thing is that they, for years, they just took a lot of those areas as just a given Labour vote, and they could focus on the cities. And now they're kind of flipping the script, and they're kind of assuming that they can rely on the cities for a vote, and trying to focus back on those other areas.
Yeah,
at least that's what it looks like now. They might change their messaging come election time.
Well, I mean, it's obviously bullshit. I mean, you can't trust the Labour Party as far as you can throw. I mean, I am a big critic of the Conservative Party, and later on, I'm going to mention the Dominic Cummings blog post that came out earlier on. I'm a big critic of the Conservative Party, but the only thing I would say is that the Labour Party are even worse. But there we go.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose to an extent, because the Tories are the outer party, there's at least some chance, that there are going to be people in there that think they can seize the reins. As I suppose you can't get that in the Labour Party, but I don't know. Stranger things have happened.
I don't know. To be honest, I don't think there's ever been a actually patriotic Labour Party. I mean, every Labour government has resulted in a vast cut in British armed forces, everyone without exception. And that includes that arsehole Blair who put us into a 20-year war. But maybe if you went back to Ramsay MacDonald, maybe. But even he actually caused cuts in the Royal Navy and stuff like that. So I don't know. I just think Labour, no. Just no, as far as I'm concerned anyway.
Yeah, I mean, even like if you speak to people that are a bit more, that are sort of our persuasion, but a bit more open-minded, they might point to. I remember someone pointed to Michael Foot, and admittedly, he did say a lot of correct things about the EU before we joined it back in the day, but there's also like huge implications that he was in touch with the KGB. So even then, it's not. It's they're very, very tarnished.
Yeah, and same thing with Harold Wilson. I mean, who resigned very dramatically and in somewhat mysterious circumstances, even to this day. I've certainly heard rumours that Harold Wilson was also tarnished with the same kind of KGB brush.
Louis Le Prudent said, the outer party is there to give the appearance of balance and thus legitimacy. It should be torn down. We should vote just for Labour. That way they go full hog and alienate everyone. Well, see, the thing with that is that, yes, that's entirely what the outer party is there for. But the thing is with the outer party is that people within it don't often realise that's what they're there for. And they can sort of rebel against that reality. But on the other hand, if you vote for Labour and they go full hog and alienate everyone, what does it actually matter? Like in Portugal, I've brought this up before, but in Portugal, voter turnout is in the 30-odd% range, and it doesn't matter. They still just swing into power, the sort of centre left social democrats, and just pretend like they've got some legitimacy and carry on as normal, and you can't really do anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, look, first of all, I'm not an accelerationist, which I think you've got to be if you're going to go down that route of voting for the Labour Party deliberately. Then you've got to look at how much damage they would do while they were actually in power, which I think would be actually more than people suspect. I mean, look at Tony Blair and opening the floodgates of mass immigration when he was Prime Minister. Like Britain's immigration figures were nowhere near as bad until Blair took over. I mean, they weren't good, but they were nowhere near as bad as they are now. And of course, the other thing is that Adam, and your point, you make the point very well, and I think this is one of the problems with the neo-reactionary idea of like walking away. Is that I think that exactly what you're talking about happening in Portugal is what will happen anywhere else where people just walk away. They won't care. They'll just carry on with the people who do vote for them. Even if that is not a majority of the population, they will not care. That's my own opinion.
Yeah. I mean, there is an aspect to which if you just allow the decline to carry on as part of a strategy, well, I mean, I suppose it's more that you can't stop it, so you just accept that as part of your strategy. But I mean, there's a situation now where I saw this a couple of months ago, where there's these sort of feminist thinkers in quotes, and they're writing essays about how the problem with promiscuity is that men don't have any commitment to these women, and that there needs to be some sort of social bond between the two. Kind of like this thing called marriage, but not that, because that's part of the oppressive patriarchy.
Oh dear.
Feminist there is an aspect to which people,
that's an oxymoron if ever there was one.
But yeah, there's an aspect to which they'll come round full circle again. And I suppose this is kind of like this idea that you can't retake the institutions, you can't have this right-wing retakeover, but you will have a lot of people that are sort of post the modern left, where they sort of give up on all this stuff and very much sort of reinvent a lot of these sort of what we would now consider traditional institutions. And it's kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth, because you think, yeah, but we have those institutions now, and you could just preserve them now. But it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm agreeing with MH in the chat. I just don't think NRX is practical in Britain. We actually did a whole stream on this course, but I think I can see some point to it in a huge country with a very large population like the USA. I'm not sure. I think if you try and do the NRX route in the UK, by the time anything changes, the majority of people in the UK are no longer going to be British. It's going to be as simple as that, and then it won't matter. Once you're under 50% of the population, I think coming back from that is I won't say it's impossible, but I think it would be very, very, very difficult. That's my major objection to it, to be honest with you. And as I say, I'm not an accelerationist. I fail to see how people think that's going to make such a big difference, And like I said, I just think that in a country like Britain, or even in the USA for that matter, I think if people just walk away from the traditional not even walk away from the traditional right-wing party, but if they don't support any sort of right-wing party, they'll just carry on with the 30-40% of the vote they do get. And they won't care that people have walked away. So I'm not sure it'll work. I mean, yeah, okay, it might work in 500 or 1,000 years. I don't think it's going to work in 50 or 100 though. So, it's just what I think about that. What do you reckon about that one, Warlock?
Well, I mean, I've sort of, I don't know. I think you're talking about institutions there, aren't you? I suppose. I don't know. My whole point on that would be I guess you can't remake Britain or England, right? It is the way it is. It was successful because of the way it was, right? So yeah. I don't know. It goes back to the age-old phrase, "England cannot be made again." Of course. So I don't know. I think I don't know. All these ancient institutions, the Church of England and other things, civil service and things like that. They are what the country is at the end of the day, if not tied to the soil or whatever.
I think they both. I mean, the two institutions you mentioned certainly both need breaking and remaking a bit. To be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The problem is with this is if you're fundamentally destructive, then I think you're just going to keep destroying. I think that's what we saw with a lot of left wing governments in history. They've sort of seen, oh, this is oppressive, we need to destroy it. This is also oppressive, we need to destroy it. But the problem is with that is I suppose it's a lack of vision. I suppose I don't know. The whole point for me, I consider myself a conservative, is to try and conserve the things that make a community moral and have common morality and have a common sort of state, right, that makes sense to people. So I guess
I would just say, look, it would be easy enough for a conservative government, because the government actually has it in its power to make bishops and so on in the Church of England. There is a High Church of England portion of the Church of England, which is generally speaking much more traditional, doesn't stand for women vicars and all this kind of nonsense. It would be easy enough for a actually real right of centre government to actually support that faction within the Church of England and bring it back to something approaching its traditional way of doing things. I mean, I am not. I call myself culturally Christian, but I'm not actually a Christian in the sense that I'm a believer. But I mean, I know that you, Royal Oak, and Limbu certainly are, and I think Ataman is as well. So I mean, I don't know what you think about that stuff.
Well, I mean, I think Sojo, who you said might be coming on later, made like the point, like saying, you know, like I think obviously during the funeral of Prince Philip, he was saying like, was that this week? I think it was this week. But he said like, oh well, you know, you can see like these are like the ancient ties to the state that have been brought out again, I suppose, for like old time's sake, well, like, you know, to give, people might say, to give legitimacy, or, you know, for whatever reason. And he can say like, oh, you know, I have like an appreciation with it. I think he said it was like Jews who are like I don't know what's the word, secular, like they still have some sense of ties to the like the synagogue or whatever. And I think he's like, well, you can see like, you know, it's what England was once upon a time. You know, we're not like the States. We're not a officially secular nation. We are, of course, officially a Christian country.
Yep.
And I think that is the foundation of what Britain is at the end of the day. But yeah,
well, Her Majesty the Queen is obviously the head of the Church of England.
She is, yeah.
Adam, what do you reckon about that stuff, mate?
I don't know. I've just blackpilled myself again. Louis Le Prudent said, but Iron Duke, they'll carry on if it's 30 to 60% anyway. If you stop voting, you throw up energy and clear your head and actually start focusing on non-establishment projects which aren't paused. Yeah. That really should be just what we're doing now.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's true, but I mean, I don't think that, I mean, I've been saying for ages now, don't vote Conservative. I mean, absolutely, I don't support voting for the Conservative Party unless you are in one of the, I don't know, somewhere between 30 and 50 constituencies where the MP is actually a real Conservative. We were talking about this a few episodes ago, that someone needs to come up with a list of the actual Conservative MPs based on what they vote for and don't vote for. And I think if you live in one of those constituencies, sure, vote Conservative. But I think in general terms, I mean, obviously, don't vote Labour, don't vote Lib Dems, don't vote for the bloody poxy watermelon Greens. But I would say in general terms, for most places, don't vote Conservative, vote almost any other populist stroke nationalist type party, whether it be for Britain or it doesn't really matter, just vote for them. And those smaller parties absolutely must get some sort of loose alliance, so they at least don't vote, they at least don't run against each other in the same constituency.
Yeah, see, one of the things I've always noticed is you get these sorts of like old guard Tory strongholds where there isn't a second option if you're on the right. You know, there will be a Labour Party and there'll be the Greens on the ballot, but there won't be that. There'll just be the Tories. You know, not even on the right, but you know, as not the left.
Yeah, listen, I haven't got an absolute solution to this, nor I suspect as anyone else. Otherwise, we would have done it. But I just think, I mean, MH is saying who. Yeah, Reform Party.
But then even the Reform Party's kind of gone off the rails a bit recently.
Yeah, no, I know that, mate. I know they're not perfect at all. I know that. But I would certainly vote either for Britain or I'd vote UKIP, where UKIP is still operating. Apparently, they're trying to have a bit of a regeneration at the moment. There's that. What's it called? The English Democrats or somebody like that, who are kind of a bit like lefty but nationalist. I'd even vote for them in some places, but all of those smaller parties have absolutely got to get some sort of loose alliance so they at least do not run against each other in the same seats, because they're competing for the same voters. And it makes no sense for Britain and UKIP to run in the same place. It's just ridiculous.
I do quite like the Heritage Party. There's a large part of it that kind of irritates me, that again it's you know, a based minority who says things that literally anyone on any of these streams would say, but they can say it because, you know, and that irks me, but that is the reality.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is what I'm saying, Edmund. It's like we do not have a good British nationalist party at the moment. We just don't. So, you know, you've got to pick the best of a bad bunch, pretty much. I don't know. Is it Limbo? Somebody is echoing again, mate. Yeah, it's just like I just think you've got to pick the best of a bad bunch. But I also think, apart from a relative handful of actually based Conservative MPs or fairly based Conservative MPs, and there's not that many of them really. Apart from those guys, we've got to stop voting Conservative as right wingers. We've got to like try and get somebody else into Parliament to shake things up a bit. It's the only chance we have, in my opinion.
Well, I don't think it's realistic to get someone in Parliament. I think like the only like way I think that Conservative policy would ever be like influenced is, I suppose, through like a I don't know, like a like I quite like if the Heritage Party got loads of votes and the Conservatives had to go to the right on like social issues.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. If we force the Conservatives to take on board more right-wing policies, that's just as good as getting it. Well, almost as good as getting MPs in.
Yeah,
but we have to do one of those two things. It's the only chance to change anything.
Yes, true.
I mean, two of the problems you run into though is if you get, let's say, your party on the ballot, or you want to get a party on the ballot that you can vote for, how much effort do you put in? I mean, we don't really want to get to the point where we have all these people tying up all their time and energy, building up a party that will ultimately still get shut out at every level. And then on top of that, you have the problem, which is that where you, I'm just blackpilling myself now, where you you have this problem where people get all tribal about it and they start putting lots of energy into something, even if that wasn't their original intention, and you end up losing ranks of people to something that was really just there to take votes away from the Tories.
Well, I mean, look, yeah, but I agree with you, Alan, I do. But I mean, look at the amount of energy and effort people put in a bloody sports ball. You know, just last week we had all this nonsense about English football teams. You know,
right? But that's something
but it's pure bread and circuses. You know.
Yeah, it is. But at the same time, you can't. You know, there'll be like 1,000,001 giant YouTube channels, for example, and media outlets that can start a public furor over this in a way that they can't over all these other issues that we talk about.
Yeah, I suppose you're right. I mean, I just think that people are going to put energy into stuff anyway. And I agree with you that people do need to put some energy into building up parallel institutions, maybe homeschooling, certainly right-wing art and literature and this kind of stuff. I totally agree with that. But I don't see why voting for a populist stroke nationalist in inverted commas party rather than the Conservatives is going to stop you doing any of that stuff. You know, you only vote once every 5 years or so in a general election. And the local elections, what you're going to vote maybe 2-3 times in 5 years?
Yeah, I'm more thinking that I'm worrying about people getting sucked into something that should never have been a long-term thing for us.
Well, I'm sure some people will get sucked into that stuff. I mean, I look at the British political parties at the moment, and I'm talking about the non-mainstream parties on the right, and like none of them can I put my hand on my heart and turn around and say, yeah, I totally support that party. None of them. But we've got to do something to give ourselves some sort of a voice, or at least force the Conservatives a bit more back to the right wing where they should be in the bloody well first place.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Like, I suppose to counter Ataman's black pills, I was quite pleased when I got a leaflet through the door from a candidate saying, "Oh, I'm going to oppose, changing all the street names, putting plaques on statues. I'm opposing, further COVID restrictions." I was like, "Yeah, he's seems like a fairly upstanding kind of candidate to have. I'd happily vote for him." I hope he gets lots of votes. So I mean, I know that those options are still there. Like there's someone willing to fund this guy. Like someone's paid for him to send around a load of leaflets, and quite nice leaflets at that. And I think there might even be more stuff eventually. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Like people say, like, oh well, we've got like no elites or whatever. Like, you know, we need more elites. But like, there are like sort of right wing elites, aren't there? There's like Aaron Banks. There's people that, you know, funded Lawrence Fox and things like that. I suppose there's only like a few issues onto which like we're separated from like them. For example, like more socially conservative on some things. So I mean, I think if there are, I suppose like with the death of Roger Scruton, like last year. I think like that was the last person that like really was like in the public sphere, like advocating. I suppose other than Peter Hitchens, but Peter Hitchens is sort of a bit defeatist.
Totally
but yeah. So to use one term, Blackfield, yeah. But I mean, he was the sort of last person that like advocated it to on a more like establishment level. I suppose like I don't know, like Academic Agent goes on about tens, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I suppose like a few more tens, a few more like, you know, public advocates for, you know, traditionalist social conservatism and, you know, nationalism, things like that. I don't think it's a million miles off. I don't think it's like impossible. But anyway.
Well, I would just point out that Peter Hitchens actually advocated exactly what I advocate, which is to vote for a party other than the Conservatives. But, you know, I will just point that out.
Well, yeah, you say that. It's a bit more complex than that, because I think he said there was an interview he did. People have brought up the SDP, I think, in the chat a second ago. There's an interview he did with William Coulson, where he said like, oh, I don't think a third party is a solution because of the two-party system. Like so he was even defeatist about third parties. So I think he's just generally very defeatist. I think like to an extent, I think Hitchens actually on quite a lot of issues, like based on something, I think he did an interview on Hearts of Oak. I think there's quite a lot of issues onto which he's pretty right wing on, but like he just doesn't, because he knows he's not going to get an invite on, you know, whatever is the Today program if he like goes on about, I don't know, either, you know, demographics or cultural decline or like homosexuality or even immigration to an extent. So
he does have lines he won't cross for sure.
So he's just like trying to. Yeah, I think he's probably the only person who's like a traditionalist conservative left, like sort of nudging the Overton window on things like grammar schools and you know, other stuff like that. I think he was good on COVID. But yeah, carry on. Sorry.
I've watched loads of stuff that Hitchens has done, like going back quite a few years. And so far as I could work out, Hitchens' idea was pretty similar to what you and I have been talking about. And it's his idea back when he supported doing anything politically, which he doesn't now, but back when he did, his idea was, yeah, we probably can't easily get MPs, and certainly not many MPs, but we can force the Conservatives to the right. So, you know, that's still my point.
Yeah.
I thought you were supposed to be countering my depressive points here, but I don't know. You can look at like Brexit, right, or Trump, and people will be very quick to go, oh, but you know, Trump was always rubbish. It's like, yeah, sure, whatever, doesn't matter. Like, people put him in power on maybe a hope that he was something that he wasn't, and that's absolutely true. But that's what happened, and people got Brexit done. But how much energy did it take to get Trump in office, and how quickly has all that been destroyed? You know, there are some white pills to come out of it. Like, it's been shown to a great number of people that it can be done, and we've largely made, you know, the establishment reveal itself on both those issues.
Yeah.
But it just seems like you're literally sacrificing 1 million troops to, you know, win the foothold of a much larger hill that you're never going to get to the top of.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I take your point, but I also think that, like, maybe a lot of those people who would expend a lot of energy on that stuff probably wouldn't form parallel institutions or organize homeschooling groups and all this other stuff that we talk about doing if you don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing as well is, like, there's already murmurings. There has been for many, many years that they would like to get rid of homeschooling.
Yeah.
And I'm a big proponent of homeschooling. And
yeah, do so.
I think it's actually it's growing quite quick. It's small, right? So obviously its version of growing quite quick still means it's tiny. But you know, I mean, I literally spoke to a complete stranger the other day who just turned around and said that both of her kids are putting their children through homeschooling because they've just completely lost faith in the school system, and that kind of blew me away. That, you know, because you meet people like that so rarely, and yeah,
well, I know
in succession.
I know homeschooling's a lot bigger in America, for example. And what seems to happen there is that they have groups of people doing it so that you can bring in people with different skills and all this kind of stuff. You know, it's not literally. I mean, sometimes it is literally the parents teaching their kids, but it's usually not literally that. It's usually groups of families who get together to organise this stuff, and that to me seems the better way to go, probably.
Yeah, but you then again though, this is where like a lot of people. I was kind of surprised Oak didn't talk up earlier. A lot of people misconstrue acceleration. A lot of people also misconstrue parallelism. Like, parallelism doesn't strictly mean that you just set up a parallel institution and step away, because they'll crush you. You need proponents of that within the political system. You need to get your allies and stuff like that.
Yep.
You know, so we need, you know, and maybe that's where you need these cringe centre right liberals like your what's his name, Toby Young. Yeah, and Sargon and people like that. Maybe that's where you need people like that to go, oh no, it's their right to homeschool, even if they're not on our side on anything.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Warlock?
Well, I think since the Blair government, I'm not overly knowledgeable on homeschooling. I know a little bit about it because I think one of my mum's friends does it. But I think they've generally tried to make it a lot more difficult since 1997, haven't they? Since the Blair government. I suppose like the reason they've done that, I mean, I don't know, from a sort of Machiavellian perspective, I can sort of see like, I don't know, if you want to like integrate someone into a way of seeing, you don't really want people like in there being told by their parents. But I mean, I suppose from a right wing perspective, that's you know, obviously it's a good thing for people to homeschool. I mean, especially if the school is like enforcing a lot of like strange values on you. I think I don't know, it depends on the school, I suppose. There's some like C of E schools where, you know, they're sort of resisting the tide, or, you know, I suppose Catholic schools as well. But yeah, I think I don't know, homeschooling generally quite a good thing, I think. But
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, Old Albion in the chat saying that the majority of the teachers seem to be left wing. Absolutely,
that's true. I think that I can give you stats on that one. I think it's 87% of teachers are Labour voters, 9% are Liberal Democrats, and 7% are Conservatives. I think that's off the top of my head, so don't quote me on that. But
that's awful.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And of course, state school systems these days are basically just, you know, years and years and years of globo homo propaganda, really. You know?
Yeah, I mean, people make a big deal about the universities, and I mean, the universities should be a big deal because it's kind of an easy win. You can cut that subversion off quite quick just by separating those universities from, like, you know, because for example now, you know, universities attendance is enormous, and all these kids are going and racking up debt and getting frustrated at that no extra career prospects, and this manifests in them saying they want free universities. And I think actually, yeah, give them free universities, you know, tie the universities back to a very strict government funding, and you'll severely limit the amount of people that go to university.
Well, I remember when I was like a teenager, university was free, but not many people went.
Yeah,
that was why it was able to be free, because relatively few people were bright enough to go.
Yeah, but then of course the problem is you get back to the situation of it doesn't actually really matter. You know, the universities are bad, but the kids are getting this stuff from regular schools where they're going for much longer years, and they're all going there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Look, I agree with Royal Oak. I mean, I know there are good Church of England schools. I know there are good Catholic schools. I'm a supporter of grammar schools, absolutely, because I think that they're a way for bright working class kids to get ahead, or they always used to be anyway. But yeah, I think homeschooling has definitely got to be something that the right supports, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was kind of, yeah, yeah, it's an issue. And but again, with the homeschooling thing, you need sort of politicians on your side almost to keep people off your back, to keep the government off your back. But yeah, someone pointed out in chat, like a lot of those politicians will side very quickly with the opposition and throw you under the bus, and that's true. And again, you get stuck back in this situation where you need your guys in the system to protect you, but that takes so much energy, and you also need to make something separate from the system because we can't keep operating the way we are.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing. You've got to do both. You need a two-pronged attack. I mean, on the one hand, you've got to try and get some actual elected representatives who more or less represent our views. On the other hand, of course, you've got to try and force the mainstream Conservative Party back to the right. And then on the other hand, you've got to do this parallel stuff. And yeah, it's going to take a lot of energy. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of people, if you ask me. But I think you've got to do all of those things. I mean, I'm hoping Sojo's going to come on in a few minutes, and maybe we can say a few words about vanguardism, because I know Sojo's our big Bowden expert. And I think a lot of this stuff that AA has been talking about lately is really, like when he's talking about tens and all this, is basically Bowden-style vanguardism, is it not?
Yeah. I mean, he basically doesn't think that we should be bringing any more people into the movement. He thinks that we should just work with what we got.
Well, I don't know.
I don't agree.
I think there is a difference between bringing people into the movement and bringing people into your own little group. Like, you guys know that, like, my Discord's a very small Discord. And I'm happy for it to grow a little bit, but I don't want it to grow hugely. I mean, I'll be surprised if it gets to twice the number of people in it that are in it at the moment. I mean, or it certainly won't get much bigger than that if I've got much to do with it. Because I think the only way you can keep a small group of people like ourselves together is by knowing the other people who are involved. So you don't get infiltrated by, like, guys with bad intentions. And I'm not just talking about guys with bad intentions from the left, but I mean anyone, So partly I agree with what AA is saying, but I don't think that is the same thing as saying, oh, we don't want more people like actively supporting the right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I suppose if that's his point, then why is he continuing to do videos and streams? I mean, he makes plenty of money from his little. He doesn't need to do like 2 videos a week, does he? Because he makes enough from his streams and from his, what do you call it, academic agency, whatever it is.
Yeah, so, I mean, he does about 3 streams a week, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think he does. What is it? Deepest Law, and there's the news one. I think so I'm not sure if he does cigar streams every week. I don't, to be honest. I sometimes watch the news ones, but that's about it. But
yeah, I usually watch these. It was funny because like a few years ago, maybe like 5-6 years ago, I actually stopped watching AA because I thought he was too left wing, and then he suddenly went more right wing again. So
yeah. When I was like a normie conservative, like knocking on doors for Boris Johnson, like being in the Tory party, like being a One Nation conservative, I used to watch AA. when he used to do like his easy little economics videos on like Hayek and people. But I know he's gone very, very. I don't know. He's got quite defeatist. I don't think it's necessary to be that defeatist. I mean, I don't think I knew a lot of people in the Tory party, and I don't think I'm that far out of step. And I think, like, there's only like a few issues you need to push people over on, and then you're not far off. I mean, the country. I mean, we're going to have a conservative supermajority for like the next 15 years or something. So it's vulnerable to a thing from the right. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
that's my view. But I suppose if oh, no, sorry. I suppose like if people are worried about like getting I don't know, like getting censored or shut down, I suppose then you need to do like a little analysis of what you can and can't get away with saying. Like, for example, like you can't go on and say, oh, I want to throw so and so in a wood chipper. Like, you'll get arrested. I mean, yeah.
So you shouldn't be saying that stuff.
You shouldn't be saying that anyway. You know what I'm saying, but I think you just need to be like, I don't know, people sometimes, I think anonymity is partially the problem. I know I'm perhaps being slightly hypocritical, but I mean, I think like when people don't have their face out there, they're more willing to say some like more silly things sometimes. And, you know, I think that's been, you know, a very negative thing generally. But I suppose, I don't know, just like, I don't know, an analysis of what you think you can and cannot say. And I don't know, that's not sure where I'm going with that. But anyway.
Well, I mean, you can't know exactly what you can say because, like, for example, YouTube make it deliberately don't say so that they can move the goalposts whenever they want to. But I mean, you know, I think you've got to use a little bit of common sense, for God's sake, which seems to be relatively uncommon these days.
That's the point, yeah.
But I think, as I say, I think you, on the one hand, yes, your own little groups, you do need to keep fairly tight, and it needs to be people that people in your group know and actually know to some degree. And like, you know, you've seen what they've said in the past or written in the past or whatever it might be. And then on the other hand, yeah, of course we want more of the general public supporting the riot. Of course we do.
Yeah, MH said in the chat that he didn't think it was AA's point to raise standards to create a vanguard. It doesn't mean don't bring in people. I think the reason I was thinking that was because a few streams ago, AA had Charlemagne on, and he said something along. They were talking about that we've got enough people. We should stop with all this red pilling, and it should just be about gatekeeping. And I
yeah,
thought
I remember
those
that.
2 points are kind of vaguely like what he's pushing at now is kind of very sort of in the lines with that. So he's not probably strictly saying don't bring anyone in, kick everyone out, but he's kind of saying it shouldn't be a mass movement anymore. It should be something, you know, taking what we've got and molding it.
Well,
I would just say, I think in terms of like you mentioned Charlemagne, and obviously we're talking about AA, who I generally like, by the way. I watch most of his streams. One thing we've got to point out about people like Charlemagne and AA is that both of them were very, very on board with the Trump train. And when it was derailed and destroyed, as it has been by Globo Homo, that seems to be when they've suddenly recoiled and gone this, you know, big time NRX route. So I think that's worth looking at too. Sorry, Warlock, you were going to say something?
Well, I don't know. It goes back to the point. I mean, like, when was what AA was doing populist anyway? I mean, like, I don't think there's ever been like a populist organization that was ever based on economics, for example. Like, he's very economics focused. Less recently, but I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't call myself a populist generally. I think it's something that leads to, you know, a wide variety of problems. Like, for example, just because something is popular doesn't mean it's necessarily good. And number two, it leads to demagoguery as well. So, yeah, I'm not like a populist per se, but I'm not like, I don't know. I think like Bowden was right about like a vanguard, but I don't think like Lenin's vanguard would like not allow, or would say like, oh well, you know, people aren't allowed to join our club or whatever. I don't think it was a particularly, maybe it was, but I'm not an expert on that. But I mean, anyway.
But yeah, to go back to what we were saying a second ago about the conservatives and like general conservatives being, you know, not that far away from us. There was actually a survey by the ESRC Party Members Project. Actually, it's a bunch of data from a bunch of different surveys, and they basically plotted social values of people at different stratas of party institutions against voters, and basically most of the Tory sort of the Conservatives, I don't like using the word Tory, of the Conservative members of various things right the way up to councillors are almost in line with Conservative voters. They peel off slightly to the left, but not that bad until you get to Conservative MPs, and then it is quite a sharp jump to the left, to the point that Conservative MPs on social values are to the left of all voters as an average.
Yeah, I mean, it's the parliamentary party that's the problem with the Conservatives, for sure. I mean, I think there's lots of pretty based grassroots Conservative supporters, and as Adam was just saying, I'm sure there are plenty of based Conservative councillors and so on, but it's the parliamentary party which is the problem.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is about this is that, oh, crikey, I've lost my train of thought now. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought, don't worry. It'll come to me in a moment. Yeah, that was what I was going to say. Look, like, you know, we were talking about populism and populist parties. I mean, I would absolutely prefer there to be an actual British nationalist party that I could hand on heart say, yeah, I like this party and I like their policies. I mean, the fact is there isn't at the moment. And so, as I say, when you're looking for a vote that is, when you're looking to vote for somebody that isn't a left of centre Conservative MP, you've really got no choice but to include populist parties as well as semi kind of nationalist parties, because we don't really have a good nationalist party in the UK, sadly. So I don't know. Anyone else got anything to say on that? Limbo, you haven't said anything for a while. You got anything to say on that stuff?
Well, I think I agree most with what I wrote, to be honest. But I think one thing definitely is if we do want to have if you're going to vote, at least the party has to be worthwhile. If we're just going to have options of like the Tories, Lib Dems, and your Labours and that crap, I don't think there's no point in voting. But I'm not fully a reactionary type of attitude. But I think one massive thing is that if we do want to make change in the Conservative Party, I think one thing we need to do is we need to start local. We need well, essentially as a movement, we need to get councillors that we know to vote for our ideas. Like, for example, keeping up statues, keeping up traditional names, keeping your local Anglican parish, even though I'm not even Anglican, blah, 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 just keeping up with those values. Then eventually a domino effect will ripple and then it'll go higher up eventually, I hope. That's one way to do it. There's multiple other ways. So
I know Ataman and perhaps Royal Oak, but I know Ataman for sure will maybe have some views on whether that localism can kind of translate into useful stuff.
I haven't got an answer. I don't know. That's kind of like, you know, the jigsaw that I'm always trying to put together is how can you make there's got to be a way to make sort of grassroots stuff translate into drive forward into a sort of national level, but I don't know how you do it.
I suppose, I don't know, I think, and Ataman's spoken before, and I mean, I wasn't like in the Conservatives as like a base Conservative. I was more just like, I think I've generally considered quite milquetoast by a lot of people. I don't know, but I mean, I suppose like I don't know. The problem is like I suppose you're in there on your own, aren't you? I suppose there's no like you're just like the one solitary. I'm not really sure I'm going with this. But...
I mean, there's always sort of people in the room that are
yeah, for sure
in every room, but there are sort of the people that usually end up as the heads of, at least in the sort of places where I've been, they're usually more on the sort of liberal lilt, and they try to let you have your say, but within a controlled environment.
Well, I mean, Bowden was in the Conservative Party for quite a long time. I mean, admittedly, back in the day, but he was wasn't he in the Monday Club, I believe?
He was, I think, until 2006 or 2007, something like that. Yeah.
So I mean, you certainly can be a right-wing Conservative. It's the difficulty is influencing the parliamentary party to the right, which is what we really need to do. I mean, I noticed how we got here in the chat says Tory MPs are also miles economically rightwards of their members and voters. I'm not actually sure if that's true, to be honest with you. I'm really not. I mean, a lot of Conservative government policies are actually semi-socialist in my opinion at the moment. So I don't know. You know, I'm not quite sure how he thinks that's the case. I mean, unless he's talking about having mass immigration to keep down wages and force up housing prices. Well, I mean, maybe in that sense, but I mean, I wouldn't actually say that was right wing myself. I'd say that was global hormone or right wing.
The Institute of sorry, Limbu can go if you want.
On the economic question of whether Tory MPs are right wing or rightwards, at least, I don't. Come from my perspective, my ideals. I don't really see most Tory MPs being right wing in economics. I mostly see them being libertarian liberals at best. So, like when like I was going to say this earlier, when we talk about based conservative grassroots MPs, we fail to realize that economics does change our philosophy and our viewpoint. So, for example, when we talk about based MPs like Edward Ley, John Redwood, like all them lot, I think we fail to realize that they've been lobbied the hard out. So they've been full of hedge funds, etc., all that type of stockbroker crap, and then you've got them expressing some type of Thatcherite neoliberalism, and what that does. I mean, yeah, sure, you can have some type of moderate mixed economics, but if you're not going to express some sort of like true conservative economics, like what I see as true conservative economics is some type of corporatist distributism. I mean, I know I was talking about it with Royal Oak earlier on the server, but if we're truly going to espouse capitalism and all that, how is that going to push us forward? So that's going to push us forward to a liberal, individualistic mindset. And is that certainly conservative? Does that help us traditionalists? Individualism? No, that certainly doesn't help us. That certainly doesn't help the community. So I think certainly we need to have some sort of German conservative revolution. And what I mean by that, certainly an economic revolution. We need to not try and kick out the Thatcherite ideas, but we need to like add our own type of economic system to the debate of the reform of the Tory party, essentially. And that's how we reform the Tory party again. But yeah, I'll get to Royal
Oak. Well, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think in terms of economics, the Institute of Economic Affairs and like the associated organizations, like the Atlas associated groups like the ASI, they basically control like conservative economic policy. Like I think that's basically what he meant by the Conservative Party is right wing. But I mean, I think I would say that's true. I mean, like I suppose I wouldn't really call like necessarily liberal economics necessarily right wing. I suppose traditionally it'd be centre left. But I mean, like I don't know, like the whole COVID thing sort of mixed up a bit, isn't it? Really, because obviously they've given out a lot of money where traditionally they wouldn't have done. I think even before that, I think Rishi Sunak would have passed quite a Keynesian economic policy after 2019 anyway. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, Dominic Cummings said quite a while ago that he said all the parties seem to aim for this sort of imaginary moderate, but he said all voters are generally to the left and right of what they view as this moderate. And I mean, yeah, he's basically saying, you know, economically more left and socially more to the right. It's kind of funny that the Conservatives do manage to hold on to power quite a lot when, you know, they've lost that rightward social value that they claim to have, and are also on the unpopular position when it comes to economics. It really is just that they're just the brakes to the Labour Party, and that's all people seem to see in them.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. How we got here said in the chat that Tory MPs come out right-wing economically and socially liberal, which is the opposite of a lot of their voters. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think that's absolutely true.
Yeah, that's true.
I've just put a link in the chat for anyone who wants to look. HTTP DominicCummings.com, which is Dominic Cummings' blog post, which came out yesterday, I believe. in which he's talking about his disagreements with Alexander Johnson and Number 10, which makes very interesting reading. I don't know if anyone saw it. It was on the Discord earlier, but I thought I'd put it in the chat for anyone who wants to have a look at it. The stuff about the Prime Minister kowtowing and cucking to his bloody girlfriend, of course, we all know about, but Cummings is confirming that. He's also talking about a bit of corruption going on about the Prime Minister's flat being redecorated, and basically disagreeing with a lot of the stuff which Alexander Johnson and the Number 10 office are claiming. So, listen, I'm not an unadulterated Cummings fan, but I was disappointed when he resigned, particularly over that silly bitch that Alexander Johnson is bumping at the moment. But who's not even his wife. I mean, it's just his girlfriend, for God's sake. But I don't know. Has anyone read this? Have anyone got any opinions?
I haven't seen this.
Okay, well, it's in the chat. If you, it's not a very long article.
I did actually give this a read through. Yeah, well, it seems like the influence of this this woman is perhaps a little overarching on the Prime Minister.
Yeah, it's a bit deleterious, if you ask me.
It doesn't surprise me. I mean, it's Boris Johnson. I mean, like, he doesn't have a lot of respect for, like, I don't know, kind of these institutions. Does he? Sort of a bit brash, bit brazen, you could say. That's sort of in his nature. What else to say about it, really? I don't think it will damage him. I think the Labour Party is in too much of a weak state. I don't think this will hurt the Conservatives at all, to be honest. There's been plenty of gaffes they've had over the last 5 years, and I think if COVID made them lose 1 point or something in polling, then I don't think this will make any difference. But
well, I noticed that Cummings has suggested the way to go ahead with this is to actually have an urgent parliamentary inquiry into the government's handling of COVID. I doubt very much if Alexander Johnson is going to be at all keen on that idea. I think he'll be very anti that idea, actually.
I'm reading in here about this. No, go on.
I can't see the Tories falling out all from this. I mean, look at the lobbying incident, and you look at
no. The
they aren't going to fall.
No, the Conservatives are not going to fall from this. But what I think, you see, this is one area where I think that the right of centre populist stroke nationalist parties could benefit from this, because most people won't care about this, but people on the right are more likely to care about it than people on the left. And so it might gain more support for some of the smaller right of centre parties, I hope. You know, in view of all this stuff we've been talking about, whether it be to try and get 1 or 2 MPs, or perhaps more realistically to force the Conservatives back to the right. Adam, you've just been reading that. What do you think of it?
I was just reading the thing about the flat. That's kind of funny, actually. Well, can he not afford to renovate his own flat?
Yeah, exactly. I thought that. You think he probably could, really, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I don't think I'd get very far if I said, "Oh, yeah, I'm going to take donations to renovate my place," you know. Oh, it is. And I could probably do it more justifiably than Alexander Johnson can, you know. But I mean, the stuff of his girlfriend just makes him look ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy's supposed to be the Prime Minister of Britain. I mean, he's listening to what some stupid girl cares about.
Yeah, it does seem very, very weird.
It makes him look like an idiot teenager.
Yeah, it was a while ago. I think it was on a different Twitter account, but I got in an argument with Carrie Simmons about trophy hunting. And she's I don't think she's that bright.
Yeah, and I also think she's certainly not that right wing either.
No, she's yeah. it's a bit weird because she's very, very hyper on the environmentalism stuff.
Yeah.
And she doesn't seem to have read Roger Scruton's stuff on it though, which kind of seems weak to me.
I think she's more likely to read Harry Potter, isn't she, to be honest?
Yeah, probably.
I mean, I was watching, there was a thing on YouTube from one of these channels I follow that was saying if we do the full Boris Johnson, Alexander Boris Johnson eco thing, it's going to cost £1 trillion for Britain to go to absolutely zero emissions. I mean, why we want to go to zero emissions when we haven't been a big emitter for years and years and years is quite beyond me, frankly. But this seems to be one of the things that this stupid woman has influenced Johnson on.
Yeah. Yeah, it all kind of seems a bit sus to me, to be honest, that they're constantly pushing towards this electric car stuff, which would just push our dependence on the Chinese market even higher.
Yeah, and it's going to cost an absolute fortune, apart from anything else. I mean, it's just the amount of money it will cost. And it will also make it much more difficult for people to I mean, back in the day, I would get in my car one Saturday morning if I felt like it and drive up to Scotland, you know. That's going to be very difficult to do with electric cars. And I think that's part of the agenda behind that.
I bet. Yeah, I mean, I basically just use my car for long journeys now, anyway. So,
I think that's the agenda.
I don't really see this electric car policy thing sticking anyway, because it's as far as I can make out, the lithium demands are pretty enormous.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, there's all sorts of other costs as well. I mean, they're setting up the charging facilities for everybody, and how do you do that for people who live in blocks of flats and all this kind of stuff, you know? It just seems to me like the whole thing is ridiculous, and there has to be some huge agenda behind it, because otherwise they just wouldn't go to trouble. You know, it's not like we're going to run out of oil for petrol anytime soon. We're not. And I mean, they're not pushing nuclear, which is the one option that is not fossil fuels, which is actually practical. They're not pushing that at all because the Greens don't like it for some unknown reason. I just think it's part of this whole Great Reset agenda myself. I really do. I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but to me, that's the real issue behind this stuff. It's got very little to do with the actual environment.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I don't know what to make of it all. Well, I do know what to make of it all, but I don't want to make that of it.
Yeah, it's pretty dodgy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's pretty dodgy, I must say. All right, guys, I'm going to play us another tune, which is our third of 4 today. And then when I come back, I believe Limbu has some stuff he wants to talk to us about regarding New Zealand and China. So I'm going to play this tune first.
This is my England, land of my creed, birthrights and heritage by act and by deed. This is my freedom, this is what I am. This is my England, this is my land. We seem to be too English for some, or so it seems. Is that too much tradition, days of yore and village greens? Is there too much pride in St. George for them to understand that England's more than life itself, to for every Englishman. Once bugled blue triumphant news, we were proud when our nation's flag flew. Englishness is a feeling deep within, it's the love of our country in the hearts of men. This is my England, land of my creed, birthright and heritage by act and by deed. This is my freedom, this is what I am. This is my England, this is my land. We seem to be too English, well, we won't let it go. This green and pleasant land is part of all our souls. Like Shakespeare, Shaw, and Agincourt, our history's golden dreams. Don't be careless with our memories and all that England's been. Once bugled blue triumphant news, we were proud when our nation's flag flew. Englishness is a feeling deep within, it's the love of our country in the hearts of men. This is my England, land of my creed, birthright and heritage by act and by deed. This is my freedom, this is what I am. This is my England, this is my land. From Elgar's land, from the mists of time, of heroes' deeds, the proud ensign of men who trod freedom's path, who fly forever like our love steadfast. Once bugled blue triumphant news, we were proud when our nation's flag flew. Englishness is a feeling deep within, it's the love of our country in the hearts of men. This is my England, land of my creed, birthright and heritage by act and by deed. This is my freedom, this is what I am. This is my England, this is my land. This is my freedom, this is what I am. This is my England, this is my land. This is my England, this is my land.
Okay, so that was another little tribute for St. George's Day. John McNamara in the chat, I think Faust has the best takes on the right. Hopefully, John McNamara will be doing a stream with Faust in the next couple of days. We've been working on it in the background. So, yes, I'm looking forward to speaking to Mr. Faust. I think that will be interesting. And we may be covering, one of the subjects we may be covering is Afrikaners and white South Africans generally today, from the point of view of a Dutch nationalist, which I think will be interesting because I haven't heard that before. Okay, guys, so as I say, that was a second tribute for St. George's Day, which I didn't want to pass without us mentioning it. And I'm now going to ask Limbu, who's been researching this for us very kindly, to talk about this stuff. I don't know if people have heard this. There's been all these rumours going around that New Zealand has kind of thrown in with the Chinese Communist Party. Now, I would first of all make it very clear this is not most New Zealand people. It is the horse-faced feminist left-wing bitch who is the New Zealand Prime Minister at the moment, not the most of the Kiwi people. So right on, Limbu, take it away.
Okay, so okay, let me just start with a few general things. Although New Zealand is not a flowers and daisies place for traditionalism, especially as a sense of liberal secularism, I could go all day on it, but the concerns of the futures of the demographics and ideologies sweeping New Zealand entirely, when they might prop up ideas of the Commonwealth being imperial, that might be something in the future. But the main point here is the recent free trade deals with Ardern's left-wing progressive government with the CCP and how it's going to affect the Five Eyes. So New Zealand wants to increase the trade agreement with China to a worth of 19 billion slash more, and this this at best will leave the country in a worse state for local farmers, and this will kill green agriculture, as this will in turn give New Zealand exports to greater access to cheap expandable Chinese markets, and it will eliminate and reduce tariffs on New Zealand exports such as dairy, timber, and seafood, and other compliance costs. So I'm no economic expert, but if you're going to expose your nation like that, there's one thing in your mind, that's obviously greed and elevation. So why is this the case then? Because New Zealand is trying to get closer with, well, in an alliance sense with China. So they're they're saying that they're not prepared to go into a trade war with China alongside with the Five Eyes Anglosphere, UK, Canada, Australia, USA. Even much to the extent that the collective better of the West of the Five Eyes intelligence should not be controlled by such and such a trade war with China. This is an obviously not in the best interests of the Anglosphere, as New Zealand is shown to give into this Chinese influence already. What annoyed me even more with this case is that the foreign minister of Ardern's cabinet suggested that New Zealand needed to maintain and respect China's particular customs, traditions, and values. What culture has China created and maintained ever since the Han Qing dynasty disappeared? Since with Mao's bollocks sweeping China, from Confucius to Mencius to what now? The suppression of a few 100,000 Catholics in China, the carefree attitude to the cheap labor, the anti-Western customs indoctrinated. What furthermore? I mean, it's no fact that ever since the Qing and Han dynasty that the Chinese never even cared about the West. I mean, if Ardern's government is going to make rash decisions like this now, how much can we trust the New Zealand government now? How much can we trust them with Commonwealth intel?
So, Limbo, sorry to interrupt you, but are New Zealand actually leaving the Five Eyes, which is something I've heard?
They aren't leaving it. However, there are rifts in the Five Eyes because of the implications of this trade deal and how they're aligning much more closer to the CCP rather than America and the Anglosphere.
Okay.
So, let me just. I mean, I'm not surprised how New Zealand's not been kicked out. The Five Eyes or, yeah, I'm not surprised they haven't been kicked yet, because since the 80s, New Zealand's been warming up to China. I mean, since the Chinese gold rush immigration to the current day of the furthering of the lessening of visa restrictions for Chinese citizens exclusively, not to Anglosphere citizens, only exclusively to the Chinese citizens. Why is that? I mean, to be honest, the British government's no authority, in my opinion, to speak about, well, Chinese authority, because we have roughly about 31 billion USD invested by the Chinese government in nuclear plants and infrastructure. Yeah. I mean, even to the point of top British goods and companies like Barclays and BP and Londis. I generally think that what Britain needs to do is stand up to China. And if Britain truly had the conscience to place our values in our mouths, we would not care about the Chinese labor financial pressure, and we would stick to our principles. And maybe even if we did that beforehand in the 80s, 70s, maybe in Thatcher's era, we would have actually negotiated good British terms for Hong Kong, and we would have protected Hong Kong's historical British values, and we
Yeah,
would
I
have
agree
had
with that.
a much more bigger Asian influence. But that wasn't the case.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would just point out that first of all, there's two things I'd point out here. One is that Victoria, which is far and away the most left-wing Australian state, the Premier of Victoria, Dictator Dan Andrews, as he is known here, actually tried to do a similar thing to what New Zealand is doing at the moment with the Chinese Communist Party. And he was only stopped by the Australian federal government. They actually stepped in and said, no, you bloody can't do that. Because, you're not totally independent, you're just trying to stay. So that there's that. And the other thing is, of course, Australia at the moment is in the middle of a pretty big trade war with China. And Australia was, and to some degree still is, pretty heavily dependent on China as well in terms of like selling them, particularly mining products and so on, like various rare earths and all this kind of stuff that you can find in Australia. But Australia, as I say, is absolutely in the middle of a big trade war with China. So I don't think Australia is going to take it as a very friendly move by New Zealand for New Zealand to, in some degree, like take over some of that trade with China. So I think that might lead to a few arguments down in the Antipodes, actually. So we'll see what happens with that one as well. Also, there was another thing I was going to mention. The British actually announced a couple of days ago that we are cutting foreign aid to China by 95%. I'm not quite sure why we give any foreign aid to China, but there we go. So, but yeah, so that's another thing. And of course, the Huawei deal that Alexander Johnson was so keen on for a long time has now gone. I mean, that's gone by the board. So at least that was a good thing. So what do people think about this one? Adam and Royal Oak, you got any comments?
Yeah, no, I'll be honest. I don't follow the Chinese stuff much, and I really should. I do often say that like Russia's the distraction and China's the real enemy. But yeah, I mean, there's something that infests the minds of these sorts of leaders, and they get this sort of mindset of decline. Where, I mean, to her, she probably thinks that, well, this is just, we just want to stay on the wave of how power's realigning in the world, but it's just going to hurt our own people in the long run.
Well, I know that this socialist feminist Prime Minister of New Zealand, Arden, I think her name is, she actually brought in some of the worst abortion laws in the Western world not so long ago. She also brought in some of the strictest lockdown rules for the Western world also. And she has, and her party also, the Labour Party in New Zealand, have repeatedly cut the New Zealand armed forces. Like the New Zealand armed forces don't even have any fighter bombers anymore. They haven't for some years now. And they're down to just 2 reasonable frigates when they used to have 4, which was, half. And as I say, I think there's certainly going to be some fallout between New Zealand and Australia over this stuff as well. I'd be surprised if there wasn't anyway.
Absolutely.
Anybody got any other points to bring up about that particular story? Which like I said, I've been looking at this all week, and people have been saying, New Zealand's becoming a Chinese ally, and I couldn't find any evidence of that. Which is why Limbo very kindly said that he would look into it for us.
Well, the one thing the Chinese are very, very good at, they're very, very good at, to conservatives, they can appear as these multinational investors are going to invest in the economy, be net benefits. And then to the left, they can sort of, and at the same time sort of say, hello, comrades, fist, and all that. So I mean, to be honest, the Chinese Communist Party, they're willing to be whatever they sort of want to be. Recently, they've been bringing back a lot of the sort of under Mao during the Cultural Revolution, they knocked down a lot of statues of people like Confucius and those sort of like old sort of Chinese philosophers. But they're building a lot of them back up now. They're becoming sort of like a culturally. I suppose they're no longer. I wouldn't say they're no longer communist, but I suppose they're like no longer like that ideological. They're more just like Chinese nationalists, for example. So I mean, they're willing to like further their goals. Whatever happens. I mean, and I think one thing, I think I've probably said it before, but like one thing that everyone gets wrong about Chinese like foreign policy, for example, is that throughout Asia, like every country absolutely hates their guts. Even the Vietnamese, like that was a total misunderstanding. I think the US went into South and North Vietnam because they thought that the North Vietnamese would ally with the Chinese and the rest of the Comintern. They wouldn't have ever done that because China wants to Hanify Vietnam. The Han Chinese used to live in a very, very small area. They used to live by in sort of like Shanghai sort of basin. And basically what they've been able to do is sort of like I suppose the word is like integrate the cultures around them and just Hanify them. And they've done it now from all the way down to Canton up to Mongolia, from Shanghai to the Gobi Deserts. 1.4. How many is it? Like 1.8 billion or something ridiculous. I mean, and they've tried to Hanify the Vietnamese and to an extent did do for a bit. But I mean, I don't know. In terms of New Zealand, I mean, I don't know. They want to expand that. They've been trying to take over Australia for a long time, haven't they? In terms of like water and coal and things like that. So I don't know. The Chinese rules on. So someone said East Asian prosperity sphere. No, if only it was that based. I mean, that's all I can say. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're right about the Vietnam. I mean, Vietnam and China had a fairly serious war in the 1980s, I think it was.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Yeah, and they certainly don't like each other, and certainly not today. I mean, we've in terms of the Chinese Communist Party building up building up like traditional statues and so on, and that sort of stuff. The way I look at that is it's a bit like Stalin in World War II when he was under huge pressure from the Germans. Bringing back lots of traditional Russian icons, and generals for the Napoleonic Wars and this kind of stuff. That's the way I look at the Chinese Communist Party supporting this traditional Chinese stuff now. It's no secret. I've said it. I'd be amazed if there's not a pretty serious war with China at some stage within the next 10 years. I'll be very, very surprised. And if that happens, it's certainly going to involve America and Japan and Australia. It could well involve South Korea. And I think it will almost certainly involve Britain because of the way we generally do things here. And if it's a naval air war, we can probably win it if we do it sooner rather than later. But it needs to be a mainly naval air war, not a bloody land war.
No, they got a lot of manpower, haven't they? I suppose. But, yeah.
Well, they got a lot of manpower, and you don't fight land wars in Asia if you got any sense.
Well, I think it was. I can't remember who said this. I think it's one of the IR theorists of like, and there's a few of them have said this as well. The more like realist ones have been saying that they think that China's been on the edge of ethnic collapse for about and it's gonna there's gonna be a massive ethnic civil war in the next. Because obviously,
doesn't China have a huge demographic problem also because of their one-child policy that they kept going for so long?
That's true.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I think that's reversing to an extent, but they did that just because they're massive population. But
yeah, but I mean, I think there's like a real shortage of women and all this kind of stuff. Yeah,
I think shortage of women, isn't there?
But isn't China still like overwhelmingly Han Chinese? Like over 85% of the population is Han Chinese, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but I mean, depends what you mean by Han Chinese.
yeah.
I think the problem is, especially with China, is that when you got the whole demographic things, you got all the Hans on the East Coast and like your Manchurian crap like that, and then you've got like your proper Hong Kongs. Like they see themselves as not Han but as Hong Kongers, so that's massive. So they've got that irredentism, same as the Uyghurs, the Muslims in the north or west, and You got the Tibetans, the Buddhists in the south and in Nepal. I mean, that's a massive problem if China's going to face it. Is that irredentism, and to what extent are these provinces going to fight back China? So yeah.
Right, yeah. I mean, one of the things we always see a lot is people will show, they'll think of like Chinese New Year and they'll think of like Chinese dragons and stuff like that, and as part of Chinese culture. And it's kind of like, well, you're only really seeing like a section of Chinese culture that's just being proliferated across the rest of China, effectively, sort of by force.
But, one thing I would say about New Zealand, I noticed Louis the Prudent in the chat saying they're making the first motions to become a Chinese vassal. Well, New Zealand has got such a small population that it's actually very vulnerable to a nation like China. I mean, even Australia is fairly vulnerable to China, and there are a lot of Chinese people in Australia these days with, shall we say, less than clear loyalties in some cases. But New Zealand, with its population, which I don't know what New Zealand's population is now, is it like 5-6 million, something like that? It's certainly not many. So they're extremely vulnerable to that kind of thing. So I just think they're treading a very dangerous line with what they're doing at the moment. I mean, particularly if they fall out with other Anglosphere nations like Australia and Britain and America. I think that's a very dodgy move on their prime minister's part, to be honest, because they don't have a lot of other allies. You know, if New Zealand hasn't got Australia as an ally, then who the hell do they have in the part of the world where they are? They're even more isolated than Australia is. Yeah, and they have a much smaller population. So you know, they're a much more rural-based economy than Australia is. And they also don't have the mineral wealth that Australia has. So I don't know. I think you've got to be careful with that. I'll just say good evening to Patriotic Archive in the chat. Good channel. You guys should go and subscribe. Incidentally, while I think of it, guys, if you're watching this show and if you've watched it before, please do subscribe. I could do a few more subscribers. For one thing, when I get a couple of hundred more subscribers, I can actually start putting these streams up somewhere else, so that if we do get yeeted by YouTube, it won't matter so much. Okay, guys. Any particular stuff you want to talk about?
No, I don't know.
I brought up the thing in the chat, the Scottish family thing. There was a lot of people ranting about that. Interesting. I put it, if you scroll up in the chat, I put it there. But yeah, so there's this new party in Scotland called the Scottish Family Party. I think they're a continuation of the Scottish Christian Party. It's been around for a bit. And there was someone who put loads of things on it. So like, they said, we support families. We at the building blocks of our strong nation, offering financial assistance. We support children from vulgar and corrupt sex education. Loads of people are getting like annoyed, like burning the leaflets. Like,
well, SNP people, you mean?
Well, yeah, and I think probably lefties as well. Just like, I don't know, It's just like what we support. It's just a general conservative talking points. It seems to me like we demand academic rigor and good behavior in schools. We promote marriage. We promote parenting. We oppose transgender ideology. We respect life. We protect free speech. Just generic. Yeah, just like generic.
But are they pro-Scottish, like Scottish independence? Are the parties neutral on the Scottish independence?
I think so.
It's based. I mean, to be honest, this party is based. Yeah.
Sounds like most of the stuff that we support, really.
Yeah, I don't know. They're just like just seems to me to be standard right-wing talking points. What used to be kind of acceptable. I think it even probably was, most Labour people would agree with that maybe 50 years ago. But so far outside the open window, people are shocked when they get it through the door. Like, I'm so angry that someone said they support families. Burning the leaflet.
I think even a lot of, obviously not party members and workers, but I think a lot of traditional Labour voters, including all those guys up north who switched their votes at the last election, I think most of those guys would probably support it.
Yeah, I think a lot of blue Labour types would probably support the Scottish Family, that party. Notto says they've been around for a while. I think this is the first time they've come to attention. I looked them up. I don't think they even have a Wikipedia article, so they're not
They
like
don't
a
have
big.
a Wikipedia, do they? Like they've only got BBC articles on their website.
Yeah, and don't forget, Wikipedia is also a pretty left-wing organisation these days. To be fair, I mean it's been proven many times that stuff gets edited by the left, and if you're a right-winger, you can't change it back.
So I think there's quite a few Scots that watch these kind of streams, really, which is a bit weird because it's sort of like quite Anglocentric, really. But I mean, Celia Solis has said they're a bit civil up, but they're all right. They've called something of a minister. Well, good. I mean, just saying, like, you know, we're in favour of like social conservatism, generally a good thing. Don't think they'll probably get any votes, but there was that guy the guy that runs Stagecoach buses. He was a supporter of the Scottish National Party. I'm echoing a bit, Limbu, by the way. He was a support the Scottish National Party, but he was very, very socially conservative, and there was a whole thing with him, like the Scottish National Party taking money from him. But I don't know. I think like Scotland. I think I thought it was a more socially conservative place, but I mean, the SNP seemed to counter that somewhat, or like, you know, the general sort of political atmosphere up there. Because obviously, I think they got rid of Section 28 before we did down here. But
you've got to remember, in Scotland, I mean, we talked about this a few streams ago. I don't know if you were on that one, Roland. In Scotland, like Glasgow and Edinburgh, really, in terms of the population, really dominates the stuff there. And because they're both relatively big cities, and Glasgow in particular has always been traditionally fairly left-wing, that's half your problem. You know, lots of the Highlands is pretty
extremely conservative.
Yeah, but there's so few people there. It's one of the least crowded parts of the British Isles. That all of those people in the Highlands and Islands don't make half as much difference because of the big cities like, or particularly Glasgow, of course, but I mean other big cities like Dundee and Aberdeen and all that kind of stuff. So you've got that, and the other thing we were talking about when we were particularly talking about this issue and the con that is the Scottish National Party, we were saying that the only way these things are going to change in Scotland is if there is some sort of homegrown Scottish right of centre party. So maybe these guys do have a chance. I know his Patriotic archive in the chat is saying that this party we're talking about in Scotland has a YouTube channel with nearly 4,000 subs. So they obviously have some support. And also, I would just like to say, yes, we do get quite a lot of Scots. We get quite a lot of Irish people. We get Canadians. We get New Zealanders. We get Australians. And I always say that, you know, Britain is an Anglo-Celtic island. It's not totally an Anglo island by any means. So, and I'm happy with that. I mean, I've got Celtic bits in me too. So, you know.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, that's largely why you get these parties springing up that are anti-unionist. Is largely because they don't like the fact that the rural vote in, let's say, Wales can be bolstered by the rural vote in England, and you know, the same for Scotland.
Yeah, there's some truth in that. I mean, but I will say that the other thing that needs to be said about the SNP is that a lot of the SNP leadership is as much Irish as it is Scottish. There's a lot of that in the SNP, and I don't say that. Scottish people say that, who know what they're talking about, and they basically con a lot of the actual Scots that, you know, what they're doing is Scottish nationalism, when to some degree it's not. It's Irish nationalism. You know, in the same way that Glasgow Celtic used to be a soccer club in Glasgow, where you would get Irish tricolour flags and loads of provisional IRA propaganda around their ground. You know, had nothing much to do with Scotland at all, really.
Yeah, I mean, John McNamara just brought up that he said, to be honest, a lot of Anglos I meet think the man on the street in Ireland is conservative. That's not true at all. That's all but gone since the 90s. Like, yeah, like the IRA and a lot of these sorts of Irish Republican movements, they sort of thought if they could get rid of England, you know, if they could get rid of the oppressive brute of England off of them, they could just be a left-wing utopia. And immediately after independence, there was a rightward shift, but that has completely been whittled away over the years. It's completely gone now. And if you look at something like stats on divorce rates or religiosity or views on abortion from like somewhere in the 70s to now, the difference is absolutely shocking.
Yeah. And Ireland fell very, very quickly. I mean, it was like quite a traditional society, like even in the 1980s, and then all of a sudden it just went completely quickly, totally globo homo.
Well, I mean, in terms of that, I suppose like any sort of identity, like I suppose the Irish identity was, it came out very strongly I suppose in a similar way to like the Polish and the Hungarians and like groups in Eastern Europe that were under communism. I suppose you could sort of compare the two, but unfairly, I think. But I mean, you could compare the two in some ways. But I suppose like that culture sort of came up. But I suppose after some time, like anything that exists, I mean, this goes sort of back to NRX stuff, but I mean, anything that exists eventually will just, be subsumed by liberalism. I mean, like if you, I mean, I think Limbo did a video talking about last week. He said like, like the sort of Gurkha culture has been, it's been sort of subsumed by like liberalism, and even the Irish cultures that's happened to as well. Like anything that exists will eventually be subsumed. But I suppose like it's the same case with everything. We've brought up like Highland people like Isle of Lewis, and I think even to an extent English rural people, and I suppose Irish rural people as well. I've never been to Ireland, but I'm sure it's the case that often they're much more conservative. The most conservative part of the country is rural Lincolnshire.
It's exactly the same in Australia. The outback is socially very conservative, but the outback doesn't win elections because the people are in cities. Most of the people. But I would say, look, going back to the island stuff, like Irish nationalism originally, going back to the 1920s and stuff, was actually a little bit fashy, to be quite honest. But the provisional IRA were always, when they weren't pure gangsters, and they often were just pure gangsters, when they weren't that, they were Marxists. And this is why the Provisional IRA and Sinn Féin, which is their political wing in the Republic today, are full-on supporters of mass immigration and all the rest of it. Brits out, Africa in seems to be their real kind of cry. And I noticed John McNamara is saying in the chat that he lived in Scotland. I mean, I lived in Scotland for a while in Stirling, but he lived in Scotland, and he's saying it's completely run by the Irish diaspora. The amount of pro-IRA stuff in their marches and meetings is incredible. So there you go. And another point from John McNamara: homosexuality was illegal in Ireland until 1992, and now look at their prime minister. So yeah, there you go.
I mean, the thing is, Ireland has had a lot of money pumped into it from sort of American Silicon Valley type places. They had like large Google offices and a Sutchell station there, and it was basically kind of turned into a bit of a within the EU sort of tax haven for that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely it was, but I don't think it's done Ireland much. I mean, it's increased their money, it's increased the GDP, but whether it's done the average Irish person much good, I would think that's much more questionable, to be honest. And particularly these days, when you've got these little villages where the government's like sending African and Arab supposed, in inverted commas, refugees, which are actually economic migrants, of course, really, but So I don't know. I think Ireland's problems are exactly the same as the problems that are facing Britain. So, I honestly, there's not much difference. I mean, there are the problems facing most of Western Europe, really. But I mean, if you're going to look at it in terms of the offshore islands of Britain, then there's really not much difference to the problems that Ireland's facing to the ones that Britain's facing, really.
I've been informed by a friend that it's called the Celtic Tiger, the economy that the Irish run through the late 80s to early 2000s.
Yeah, but it's come at a cost in terms of their social cohesion and all that stuff. I'm just going to mention Frithwolf has said in the chat. Where is it? It's disappeared. Apparently, Laura Towler and Sam Melia were arrested this afternoon and had their mobile devices seized. Might be connected to the recent arrest of Ben Raymond of NA. I don't know who Ben Raymond is, but anyway. I mean, I am no supporter of PA, but I'm also not supporter of people getting arrested either. So, So I don't know. I know that Royal Oak had some stuff that he was going to talk about that.
He's stepped out for a minute.
Okay, well, when he comes back, I'll ask him, because I know he had some stuff that was slightly related to that. Apparently, there was some sort of row going on. Where was it? There was some sort of row going on somewhere on the internet that I didn't see, because like I don't use most social media. Like I'm not on Twitter, I'm not on Telegram, which I'm quite happy about most of the time, to be quite honest with you, because it seems to be lots of bullshit going on in those different places. But I know there was some sort of argument going on between people. So I'll wait until Royal Oak comes back and ask him about that stuff in a sec. But yeah, I definitely think that there's certainly Irish influence on the SNP, and I think they kind of cover it up, and that's one of the reasons why. That's one of the reasons why they don't really want Scottish independence. They just want Scotland to be an absolutely tiny and insignificant part of the European Union. So, Frithwolf, you're right, but the Aussie Nat socks that you mentioned, I don't think are Nat socks. Actually, I actually know one of them, and one of them's he's in my Discord, and I stream with him sometimes. So I wouldn't call him a Nat sock, to be honest. But there we go. And I think it's relatively easy to get into an argument with Morgoth also. Although I try not to myself, but I think it's relatively easy to do so. Well, John McNamara, you're saying the Marxism stuff isn't as cut and dry, but the politically... those people in Sinn Féin and the Provisional IRA who were politically aware were mostly like very left-wing Marxists. Most of them were. Yeah, sure, there were loads of people at lower levels who probably weren't, but the leadership certainly were Marxist, and that's certainly where they got a lot of their help and money and weapons and training and stuff like that. Like I did 2 tours in Northern Ireland with the British Army, so we actually got quite a lot of information about that stuff. And the thing I always used to find amazing is occasionally we would stand there and photograph these guys as they all went and got their dole payments from the British government. But there we go. The IRA Army Council still controls Sinn Féin. It could well do, mate. I don't know. Although I presume it would be the provisional IRA, wouldn't it? Because the original IRA kind of became a very small group eventually. And those were the guys who back in the day were actually fairly fashy. So, and a long way from the provos who were actually Marxists, as I say, for the most part. Okay, well, as I say, Frithwolf, I know one of those guys who got involved in that argument. I know, and I don't think he's an Anzac. So anyway, but I will await Royal Oak's return.
Hello.
Oh, you're back. Okay, Royal Oak. We got onto a subject that we were talking about in the Discord, and I said I wasn't going to talk about, but it seems it's been brought up in the chat anyway.
Jakes?
This is that argument between Jobu and Morgoth and all this stuff that I believe you were following to some degree.
I didn't see what he specifically said. I'll have a look now.
But people are bringing it up in the chat because I met someone else in the chat mentioned that Laura Towler got arrested today.
Oh dear. Right. Yeah, she's made a few silly associations, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I'm not a huge fan well, I'm certainly not a huge fan of PA, but
Far-right nationalists outwardly point out other groups. We'll have to make the 2 point. Cut ties with him. Yeah, I don't know. The thing is with him, I think I said I just think Jake's and Latte seems to be like 6 months behind everyone else, and he's still like. The thing is, he says all these things. He's like, oh well, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about that, or people are going to turn off. And then he's friends with Woes, PA, Morgoth. I mean, all these people. I mean,
yeah, I used to like Morgoth. I have to say, I did until I found out how allergic he was to the Union flag. And then pretty much the same thing with Woes. I mean, although in Woes' case it was also the fact I didn't realise he was gay when he was younger. I don't know how you really changed that, but anyway. And then he just threw in his lot with all these kind of Nazi LARPing types, and that was enough for me.
I don't know. I haven't really watched a whole lot of the only stuff of Millennial Woes I've watched in the last 3 years was a handful of the Millennial stuff, and that was about it.
Yeah. I mean, I watched some of those because he has some quite good guests on still.
I was quite surprised at how many good guests he got, considering some of the things that have been said about him. But
yeah, it actually, I agree with that. I mean, there's some people I quite like who are still fine with him. So I don't know. Like I say, I'm not on a lot of social media, so I don't follow all the ins and outs of this, but I certainly don't endorse Nazi LARPers at all, and that includes PA as a wannabe party. They're not a party, but
no, I second that, and I think I mean, if all this stuff's going on, I think it'd be quite sensible to distance oneself as much as you can. I mean, yeah,
video slagging off Morgoth. As I said, look, I think it's pretty easy to get into an argument with Morgoth, and I think that's Morgoth's problem more than anybody else's. But I have not seen the details of this, so I don't know who said what.
Thomas Sewell, I've vaguely heard of him. He's an Aussie fella. I'll have a look. Thomas Sewell, internet drama correspondent, Royal Oak. Oh no, neo-Nazi arrested over alleged assault on Channel 9 security guard. Very nice. That's who Thomas Sewell is, apparently.
Okay.
Thomas, it says, do you mean Thomas Sowell? I don't think I do.
No. Thomas Sowell. I think he's a bit old to get in a fight these days. He's still alive, ain't he?
I think he's retired from doing stuff, but leader of the Australia Defence Network.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about this a couple of times, and I mean, we will go into it a bit more the next time I do an Old Commonwealth stream. By the way, I know I keep threatening to do an Old Commonwealth stream, but in order to do that, I have to have a few people from the Old Commonwealth, and one person in particular is working a lot at the moment. So
Willock supports I do not support the IRA. Okay.
I very much doubt that, Marco.
Bring back the black and tans up for the UDA and the UDF.
Yeah, I actually don't believe that Royal Oak supports the IRA any more than I do, and I sure don't, trust me.
The old ones, obviously, not the current iteration. Anyway,
I don't support any of them, not even the old ones.
No, the current iteration of the UDA and the UDF.
Oh, right, yeah. I mean, I support keeping Northern Ireland as part of Britain so long as the majority of people in Northern Ireland want to be British. So, forever, hopefully.
I agree.
But that's certainly my position on that one. Right, guys, we got anything else we want to talk about before we wind this up? Sojo didn't join us. He was supposed to. The Albion didn't join us. He was supposed to, but there we go.
Sojo's a flake, isn't he?
Yeah, he said he was going to come on in 20 to 30 minutes after we started, but maybe he's got tied up. I mean, this happens to all of us. The Albion was supposed to come on, but hasn't, so that's a pity. I'm hoping he will come on again, because I thought he was good last week. Adam, we got any last things we want to bring up before we wrap up?
No, I think I'm all right.
Limbo?
Nah, not really. No.
Royal Oak?
I can't think of anything.
All right. Well, I will just say there's almost certainly going to be a stream with me and Faust and maybe one or two other people, we'll see, sometime over the next, I'll say 3 or 4 days.
On
I think
this channel or somewhere else?
Yeah, it'll probably be on this channel, depending how much streaming I've got left.
Right.
Although actually that should tick over in the next day or so. I believe Faust wanted me to do a stream later today, but I'm not sure I'm going to do another one today. So it might have to be Monday or whenever we can fit it in, but I'll try and make it this week. And there will also be a Old Commonwealth stream, certainly in the next 2 weeks. And I'm just going to say again, please subscribe, guys. I could do with a few more subscribers. It will help the channel, and particularly it will help me move it to another platform so that it's not just dependent on YouTube. Oh, hang on. What am I looking at? Ask Oki's opinion on the Brighton hotel bombing. Go on. Is he just trolling?
He's just trolling. Obviously, I'm against the Brighton hotel bombing. I will say that just after the Brighton hotel bombing, one of the MPs that died there got outvoted by, I think, as a Liberal Democrat person. So I mean,
really?
they were kind of successful in that they got rid of Conservative MPs, very sadly. But my grandmother was worked for the Conservative Party at the time, so you know, could very well have happened that there would be no Royal Oak, but because of the IRA. But I mean. Well, luckily we got out of it, but there we go.
I'm so old I can actually remember the Brighton hotel bombing, but there we go. But yeah, all right, guys, I'm going to play us a tune, and because it's Anzac Day in Australia, this is going to be appropriate for that. So here we go.
Once the jolly swagman camped by a billabong under the shade of a coolabah tree, and he sang as he watched and waited till his billy was. You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me, waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda. You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. And he sang as he watched and waited till his billy was. You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. Down came a jumbuck ring at the billabong. Up jumped the swagman and grabbed him in glee. And he sang as he stole that jumbuck in his tucker bag. You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. Waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda, you'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. And he sang as he stole that jumbuck in his tucker bag. You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. Once the jolly swagman camped by a billabong under the shade of a coolabah tree, and he sang as he watched and waited till his billy was. You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me, waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda. You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. And he sang as he watched and waited till his billy was. You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. Down came a jumbuck to ring at the billabong. Up jumped the swagman and grabbed him in glee. And he sang as he stole that jumbuck in his tucker bag. You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. Waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda, you'll come a waltzing Matilda with me. And he sang as he swallowed that jumbuck in his tucker bag.
Okay, and that was Waltzing Matilda, sung by Aussie diggers in World War II from the Australian National War Memorial. And that's our tribute for Anzac Day. Thanks for joining us, guys. We will see you next week. Have fun.